Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you today. It's fun. I see so many people I know, people that I often see in other events, but don't often see all together in a room like this. So it's great to have so many of you here. I'll apologize ahead of time. As I mentioned, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Whatever the opposite of that is probably what I'm doing, and that is too many of you get to hear me speak too often, and so I apologize. Some of this will be repetitive to some of you, but hopefully there will be some things that I can share about where we are as a state and where we're headed, and some really unique opportunities that I think await us, as well as some potential challenges. So just a little bit of background, as was mentioned. I grew up in the small town of Fairview. For those of you that don't know where that is, if you take a map of Utah and point to the middle of it, you'll be pointing to Sanpete County. You may have heard of Ephraim or Manti. Those are the big cities. Fairview is one of the smaller ones on the northern part of the county. It's about, from here, it's about 90 miles due south. And in 1919, my great-grandfather bought the Fairview Telephone Company that was started in 1903 by 4 enterprising farmers who wanted this new invention called the telephone at their homes. And the predecessor to the Ma Bell would not bring telephone service from Mount Pleasant to Fairview, about 6 miles away, and so they decided that they would do it. They got their horses and they cut down some poles and some trees and made poles and strung some wire and eventually got phones to Fairview. By 1919, when my great-grandfather bought the company, there were it had really exploded. There were about 25 telephones, I think, at that point, and continued to grow the company over the next 60 to 70 years. The company really grew. I think they had 5 employees in 1983, and 2 of those were my dad and his cousin. When my great-grandfather passed away, he gave the farm to my grandfather and the telephone company to his brother. And we got the bad end of that deal. But my grandfather got very sick. My dad had to drop out of college to come run the farm, and fortunately his uncle hired him on at the telephone company. He asked him if he could climb the telephone pole, and he did, and that's how he got the job. And so that's kind of the history of our company. It actually started to grow a little bit. They started expanding and buying off some of the ILECs, the small rural telephone companies that the Bell companies were getting rid of, and they ended up buying the metropolises of Schofield and Eureka, Garden City, some of the big ones you may have heard of, Moroni, Mount Pleasant, a little bit bigger, and that's when they were growing. And then this thing called the internet came along. And they decided that was probably something, and so I had moved away at that point and went to law school, came back to work as an attorney here in Salt Lake, and then got a call from my dad who said, how would you like to take a huge cut in pay and come back and raise your kids on the farm and help me manage the company? We need to figure out what to do when people no longer have telephones on their wall, and that was in 2003. And so, coming back, we were trying to figure out what to do and how to expand and how to grow, and decided that the internet probably would be something, and that's where we needed to put all of our resources. And so we started investing heavily in fiber optics and trying to expand outside of our small community. We felt like it was important to figure out a way to get onto the Wasatch Front, and in so doing, we met some people and made some wonderful partnerships with people. One of those who's in the room today, Lynn Yoakum. Lynn's amazing. If you don't know Lynn, you should know Lynn. She was with American Fork at the time, American Fork City, and they had their own infrastructure, and they were trying to figure out what to do with that. With the infrastructure, the telecommunications infrastructure that they had, one of the early cities who, I guess, ended up with a system, and they needed connectivity to the outside world. And we felt like it was important for us as well to try to get into Salt Lake City to connect with the big fiber companies in the country and have a hub there. and we were kind of trying to get to the same place. And so we started talking, and we figured out, we kind of laid what the assets that we had on the table. We had made a really wise decision once upon a time as we were taking fiber optics to connect in Spanish Fork, which is where our connection was for our ILEC, and well, actually in Spanish Fork Canyon there, kind of by where the windmills are. Of course, Highway 6 was then known as the most dangerous road in America, right? It's gotten much safer thanks to UDOT, but getting a path through there was very difficult, and we knew we only had one shot at this, and we were putting a fiber optic line in there, and at the last minute my dad said, well, maybe we should just put an empty conduit in there just in case we ever need it again. And so we threw an empty conduit in there. It proved to be the best investment we've ever made, because years later we remembered we had that empty conduit. Lynn realized after some sleuthing and some incredible research that American Fork was the only city that did not give the railroad the right-of-way. They still owned the right-of-way in American Fork, the only city in Utah to own that right-of-way. And if you've ever dealt with the railroad, you understand how valuable they think their stuff is. In fact, they think it's the most valuable thing on the planet. When they don't like to play, and of course they had empty conduit along the railroad. And so we were trying to get access to that conduit, and they said no, or give us $1 billion or something like that. And then Lynn said, oh, and by the way, we own the right-of-way, and you haven't paid American Fork for 100 years or whatever. And suddenly they were really interested in working together with us. Also turned out at the same time that UDOT was trying to connect the state and trying to use fiber to connect the stoplights, of course, but also cameras that were so important. And Highway 6 is a place where you really need cameras during the winter months especially, and if there are accidents, but they had no way of getting fiber up that canyon except we just happened to have this empty conduit. And of course UDOT is putting empty conduits in all of their right-of-ways at this time, and so all the brains got together and figured out, well look, UDOT, what if we give you an empty conduit up Highway 6, and then American Fork, you now have access to conduit through Utah County thanks to the railroad, and we'll make a trade, and then UDOT, you give us conduit from American Fork and the point of the mountain into downtown Salt Lake City, and we'll just make this three-way trade with everybody's assets. And could we actually make that happen? And somehow it actually worked out, and we were able to get into downtown Salt Lake. And now many of those new buildings that you see going up in Lehigh and other places are running on fiber from Centricom out of our small town in Fairview. Now I tell you all that because I think it's exemplary of Utah and what we can do when we actually put our minds together and work together. We can accomplish great things. What came out of that, by the way, was that UDOT started recognizing that they didn't have a lot of money because the legislature, doesn't have a lot of money to give them, and the money they do get, they need to use to build roads. But it was really important to be connected, and what could happen if we were a connected state. And they wanted to do more of that, and they realized that there were private providers, again, all over the state. You just met Syringa, one of the great providers. I can't believe it's been 10 years that you guys are here. We got to work together on several projects. That there are these private providers that had access in places that UDOT needed to go. In turn, UDOT had empty conduits all over the state they really weren't using and didn't have a plan to use, didn't know what they would use it for, but that they could then, because again they didn't have the monetary resources that the legislature had given them, that they had these assets and they could trade those assets. And they were so interested in what we had done at that time that they actually hired Lynn, and this was before I had anything to do with the state. I was the mayor of Fairview at the time. They hired Lynn to come and work for UDOT and to manage their fiber assets and to figure all of this out, and started what was the first in the country fiber banking, where private providers could gain access to UDOT's infrastructure in exchange for trading UDOT infrastructure to connect the state. Save taxpayers millions of dollars. which is a win on the public side, and at the same time allowed private companies then to get access into areas that didn't have connectivity, or to become an alternate provider in places that did have connectivity. So there was actually some competition, which is good for the state, good for customers, drives down the price of internet access, and just makes our state much more connected. So it was really the proverbial win-win, and just an incredible outcome that, by the way, many other states are now copying. That they've recognized the value in that, and how it benefits both the public sector and the private sector in powerful ways. And so Utah is a place that is well known for technological innovation. Of course, we have people from the University of Utah here, and if you know anything about the history of the University of Utah, 50 years ago we've celebrated this, that it was one of the first 4 places that the internet existed. When Al Gore did whatever he did, this was it, and it happened here. And people sometimes forget that, but you look at again the history of technology here in the state. We have Novell and WordPerfect, and what has spawned out of them now, this tech corridor that is so incredible. Just last week I had an opportunity to tour and visit many of our friends with Silicon Slopes, and see the great things that are happening there. We're being recognized again, not just across the country, but across the world, as a hub of technological advancement. One of the greatest things that you may or may not heard of, it's probably been talked about in this meeting, but Andy Buffmeyer, who's here with us, has been leading the charge on this. The University of Utah and Salt Lake City was selected as a place to really do wireless innovation in the 5G space. And the opportunities that are coming out of that are just incredible. We've been talking about some more of those today, and what that means again for the future of communications in our state. And so we stand at this very critical point in time. I know we are here in this beautiful building. You can look out, you can look down south and see where there is going to be some big changes. We have a prison that is moving, and if you follow that at all, you know it's headed out west of the airport in the southwest quadrant, and we have about 700 acres right here in the heart of this incredible economy that is booming. By the way, the fastest growing economy in the nation over the last 3 years. More private jobs per capita than anywhere else in the country, and that's remarkable. And so the future of what happens with those 700 acres is going to be really interesting. What you may not know is that the state owns that, obviously, but we now have what is called the Point of the Mountain Authority Board, and it is the land use authority for that area. I am a co-chair of that authority board, and this board will be making the decisions about everything that happens in that place, in those 700 acres. In the future, it's awesome. There's really nothing quite like it in the world. In a spot like this, with an economy that is thriving, the technological companies that have popped up around there, to have what will basically be a green space opportunity with 2 freeways surrounding it, just in the heart of our state. There's nothing like that anywhere, and we want to make sure and not screw this up. But one of my concerns is, as we've been going through this and trying to figure out what we're going to do here, is that we often think too small. Because we don't know what we don't know, and there's kind of this thought. Well, of course, we'll have some businesses come in, and we'll have some housing, and we'll have some retail, and it'll look like everything else, right? And I think that would be a huge mistake for all of us. I think we have a unique opportunity to do something here that's never been done. I think we need to think much bigger than that, more broadly, and obviously obviously making that a smart community, I think, kind of goes without saying. Imagine it being a place, a carless community as well. The opportunities there are incredible as we think through mass transit. How can this development actually make Utah's air cleaner? What can we do to make sure that we're providing the right pieces of jobs and education as well? Can we connect people in ways that will make their lives better and improve the quality of life here in the state of Utah? Can it be a place where people come from all over the world to see? Could it be a show place for what future cities could look like? I think, of course, you know what's happening with the Mighty Five. I think Temple Square still leads the state in tourism. Why could this not be a destination place where people come to see how to do things better? And there's no reason that we can't do that here. But of course, we need your help. We need the best and brightest minds in the state and across the country and the world to make that happen. So there are really incredible opportunities that await us here in the state of Utah. I want to point out, though, some of the challenges as well that we're facing. And I know, again, some of you have heard me talk about this, but it's so important. And I talk about it all the time because we should be talking about it, and we need to engage all of you in this process. We stand on the precipice of some of the greatest technological change in the history of our society. You've seen it in your lifetimes. How quickly technology is changing and impacting our lives in very, very positive ways. Again, these are wonderful things. But what is happening now, I think, will make the Industrial Revolution look like child's play in many ways. Again, the way it changes our lives, we look at the challenges in our state, and as we look forward, the biggest challenges are all growth related. I mentioned we're the fastest growing economy in the country over the past 3 years. We're also the fastest growing state since the last census. We're adding more people per capita than any other state over the last 9 years. Now, part of that is birth rate, and we've historically led the nation in birth rate. We're great at having kids. It's kind of our thing. But we're not so much anymore. You may be surprised if you didn't know that. We're now fourth in birth rate, so we've fallen off, and our birth rate has actually continued to decline over the past 10 years, which is a historical anomaly. Historically, when we have a good economy, birth rates go up, and when you have a recession, birth rates go down. This is one of the first times in our state's history where we have had a good economy, but we have had birth rates declining. We are now below replacement rate for the first time in our state's history. Replacement rate is considered 2.1 births per female. We are now at about 2.04 per female, and that will certainly have impacts going forward. However, we are still being fourth is high. Most of the country has been below replacement rate for a long time now. But we are now top 10 for in-migration. So 8th or 9th per capita. People have discovered Utah in ways it hasn't been discovered before, and they're coming here. They're coming here partially because we have a great economy and there are jobs available. In fact, our biggest problem with the economy right now is workforce related. We're having a hard time finding the workers, and I'm going to focus on that in just a second, for the jobs that are available. So people are coming for those jobs. Now, of note, about 60% of that in-migration are people who have lived here before, which means that these are kids and grandkids who have left the state to go to school or to go to get a job somewhere else, and now they're coming back because the jobs are here, which is good news. However, again, the challenges associated with that growth. We see transportation challenges. I drive from Fairview to the Capitol every day. It's 100 miles one way, 200 miles round trip. I am part of the problem. I apologize for that. But it's that if you drive through Utah County, northern Utah County right now, it's like a game of Mario Kart. It's pretty crazy. You're grateful when you survive and you make it. But what you need to know is that stretch of road wasn't supposed to be at capacity until 2028. And it was at capacity last year because, again, of the explosion in growth that has happened in that area. And so we look at transportation. We know we can't keep adding lanes to the freeway, right? And this is where This is the upside of technology and these changes that we're going to go through for the next 10 to 15 years. There are a couple things that we can do technologically that will change that. One of those is that we can put cars closer together on the road to make more space. And the way that that happens is with driverless technology. And that technology is here. Of course, it's being refined. Federal researchers tell us in the next 10 to 15 years, most cars will be driving themselves. And when they do that and the cars can communicate with each other in real time, the cars only have to be a couple inches apart instead of 2 car lengths apart, which means that you'll be able to fit a lot more cars on the road. Also, we know that most of those cars will be electric at that point, which will significantly help with our air quality and the emissions problem. So technology is going to do a lot to solve this. Also, while we can't build wider, we can actually build up in a very, very cheap way. And that is the airspace above our roads. UDOT is actually investing right now in technology that will be used for autonomous flying vehicles. They'll be used first of all to deliver packages and goods. That's already, there's some testing going on actually at the University of Utah for drones that are delivering from University Hospital to other areas. That's happening right now. We'll be able to do that along our highways and byways in the not so distant future. And then it will be people, and those vehicles are actually being tested now as well, that will be able to move people above the roads, which will help again with our air quality and help with our traffic in powerful ways. Those are some of the really amazing things that are going to be impacting this soon in positive ways. Now, to the negative side. I mentioned that we're having a hard time filling those jobs. We have thousands of tech jobs that are available right now that we cannot fill. And these are high-paying jobs. These are great jobs. What happens when cars are driving themselves? The #1 employment in 35 states is driver. Okay, truck driver, Uber driver, taxi driver, bus driver. The #1 profession in 35 states is driver, and it's top 5 in every state. What do we do with those millions of drivers when those cars drive themselves? Right? This is the difference, and again, I know I've shared this with some of you, but I think it's so important to be thinking this way. The nature of work and the nature of education and how we alter that in positive ways that will impact us while we're living in our smart cities and our smart cars are taking us and everything's smart, but sometimes the people aren't smart enough for the jobs that are being created and the severe transformation. What happens when we go through a period of serious transformation like that? Again, you can go back and look at the Industrial Revolution, the social upheaval that happened during that time, and then kind of imagine that on steroids. We know, by the way, it's no secret what happens to people when they lose jobs and aren't qualified for the work that is available. You can see that in parts of rural America. You can see that in parts of rural Utah. Those of us in northern Sanpete County where I live, Emory and Carbon counties where so many of those jobs have gone away and the new economy hasn't found us yet. These are jobs that people have held, coal mining jobs for generations that you could raise a family on. They were hard jobs, but they were good jobs. And my friends growing up, their dads all worked in the coal mines or in the power plants there. Many of them have lost those jobs. And what we're seeing is, we're seeing increased opioid addictions, suicide deaths, the deaths of despair, as we refer to them, that are skyrocketing. Opioid rates at double the state and national average in some of these areas because of these economic issues that have impacted them. And so while it's important to celebrate the Silicon Slopes of the world, it's also important that we don't forget these communities that have been left behind. And again, what does that mean? And not just for rural Utah, because it's going to be impacting all of us on the Wasatch Front and elsewhere. A friend of mine who retired recently said, when I graduated from college, I had all the knowledge I needed for the first 30 years of my career. And yet, and I laughed at him because I said, that will never happen again. That is gone. We routinely graduate people from college who don't have the knowledge they need for the first year of their career. And how do we change that mindset that education isn't something you just do for the first 20 plus years of your life and then work what you do after. But those two things are combined, that we are lifelong learners, that we go through, that our economy is such that we're in a constant state of work and education, and the role that the private sector will play and have to play in that education process, and how do we rethink those things in powerful ways. That's what I wanted to share today, just a little bit about what's happening out there, how incredible it is, how awesome it is, what an amazing utopia we're headed towards, but also there is this dark underbelly of that change that is going to impact all of us, and we can't forget that piece. We must not leave people behind. We have to make sure that communities, as we move to this new economy, that communities and especially people understand that there is a place for them and that there is a way to transition them into these jobs that are available, so Utah can continue to be a national leader, not just in the economy, not just in technology, but a national leader in people and upward mobility. By the way, we do lead the nation in upward mobility, which is really cool. Harvard's written about this. The American dream is dying everywhere except for Utah. It's the one place where you can be born in poverty and not stay in poverty, because you have opportunity, you have access, and we don't want to lose that. So with that, I'll end my prepared remarks, and I would love to answer questions, talk about anything that you would like to talk about. Please, Joe.
Would you mind sharing the initiative that you've led for the remote workers that are government workers? Because it's
Thank
a great
you,
example of everything that you've talked about.
No, and I appreciate that, and it's something that I want to talk about, and I'm glad you brought this up. So we, as I've been, again, with my tech background, and now having been in this position as Lieutenant Governor now for 6 years, I've been a little frustrated as we celebrate the incredible economy that we're having, that rural Utah was not seeing that same opportunity, that same growth, and trying to imagine new and better ways to get some of these jobs. Again, we have this problem we have more jobs than people on the Wasatch Front, and we have more people than jobs in rural Utah. And is there a way to bridge that gap? And we're working on some great things, and Joel and his team in Carbon County especially, some great things that are going on. But one of the things that I've just been adamant about for years is this idea of remote work. It was kind of a big deal maybe 10, 15 years ago, this concept that we were going to have remote workers, and then it kind of crashed and burned and went away a little bit. And I've always been frustrated by that because a lot has changed since then. First and foremost, the technology has changed. It's so, if you had to have a T1 or back in the day, it was really expensive, and video conferencing wasn't great anyway. And now, we can all do it. I mean, my son's in Tahiti for 2 years, and we get to video conference with him every week, and it's just remarkable. And so the technology is now ubiquitous, it's cheap, it's available, and so we. As I was traveling around and talking to Silicon Slopes executives who are all thinking outside the box, except that they still believe that everybody has to go into a box to work, and trying to encourage them to look differently, and struggling to get any traction, I realized, wait a second, I just happen to be the second in charge of one of the largest workforces in the state. We have about just over 20,000 employees in the state. I'm like, well, why don't we do it? And so I asked the governor to let me run a little experiment, and he relented and allowed me to do this. It was about a year ago, and we took 130 employees in the state office building, which is the ugly North Korea style building right behind the Capitol that you may have seen. We allowed them on a volunteer basis to work from home 3 to 5 days a week, and they did this for 6 months, and we monitored everything they did. We knew what kind of cars they drove. I mean, again, this was all voluntary. This wasn't Big Brother. They let us do this. They let us know what kind of cars they drove, so we knew what kind of emissions those cars were putting out. We knew what their commute was, how many miles they were driving a week before and after they started working from home. We measured their mental health. This was really important. At the end of every week, they would report on how happy they were and how they were feeling about life. We brought in some experts, by the way, because it's not as simple as just saying work from home. You actually have to train people how to do it, and you have to train their supervisors as well, because it's just a different world, but it can be done. And most importantly, though, we measured their productivity. We want to see, how productive they were working from home, because that's the big knock. If you let people work from home, they won't work, right? They'll just lay on the couch and watch cartoons or whatever. And so we did all of that. You won't be surprised to know that we took traffic off the road and we took pollution out of the air. Quite a significant amount of pollution, which was fantastic. Turns out that they were a lot happier than their coworkers, because by the way, we also measured the same stuff with the people doing the exact same jobs still at the state office building. Turned out, by and large, they were happier than their colleagues. Turns out these soul-sucking commutes are not great for anybody. I know. For 6 years, I drive about 60,000 miles a year, so I get it. And then their productivity, and this is the one that blew us away. Their productivity went up 22% over their colleagues back in the office. 22% is a huge number. If I went into any business and said, what if I told you that you could increase your productivity by 22%, people would fall all over themselves to do whatever it takes to do that. And think about what that means for the state of Utah. I mean, again, that increase in productivity means we have to hire fewer workers, which is good because we also can't find workers. We're struggling right now. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, think about the savings to taxpayers in not having to build buildings. Again, especially in this economy. We're going to save millions of dollars to taxpayers by actually being able to get rid of some old leases that we have, not having to build as many buildings as we had originally planned. We're pioneering some shared workspace concepts now, so that for those employees that have to be there once or twice per week, we have a shared workspace, so you can have 2 or 3 workers in the same space. So again, it really constricts the amount of space that we need as a state. And then again, we're taking cars off the road, taking pollution out of the air. These are just wins. And then the piece that I was really after, selfishly, now people from rural Utah, where I live, can start applying for these jobs when these jobs become available, because you don't have to live in Salt Lake City to have these jobs now. You can live anywhere you have an internet connection. And I'm a little biased, but we've done a really good job in rural Utah of getting internet connections. Not everywhere, we still have work to do. But many of our rural communities have fiber connectivity, have gigabit Ethernet available, high-speed internet, whatever is needed for these jobs. The good news is the governor, because it works so well, has given us permission that over the next year, we will now make 2,500 of those jobs remote work jobs. And so we're very, very excited about that. I think we still have a few more minutes. Are we okay? Time-wise? Just stop me when we're done. We have a question.
Yeah, could you touch base or your vision or thoughts on the ag industry and this transition to tech and everything, and maybe even also on the inland port?
Sure. So 2 questions here. 1, the ag industry, and 2, the inland port. I got a chance to speak at the Silicon Slopes conference last year, and I was talking a little bit about the importance of computer science in every class. And hopefully you saw the big announcement that we announced. The governor has proposed a $10 million. Silicon Slopes is working to match that. They're putting their own money there. So that over the next couple of years, we will have computer science in every school at every grade. And the question was, why is this so important? And so I was talking about how, look, we don't need every kid to get a degree in computer science. That's not it. But every career is being impacted by technology and by computers. And I brought up ag, and people laughed at me. I talked about cows milking themselves. This is really happening. You can Google it. It's a thing. So in a modern-day dairy farm, I grew up on a dairy farm. Fortunately, my dad sold the cows when I was a kid. I'm grateful for that every day. We're still farming, just not the cows. But in new dairies here in the United States, we have a couple in Utah. What they do is they put a chip in the cow's ear. It's a tag, and it turns out cows get uncomfortable when they need to be milked, and they know when they need to be milked. You actually get more milk the more often you milk a cow. When I was a kid, we milked cows twice a day, then they moved to 3 times a day, which is about all you can do as a human. It becomes very difficult. But computers and robots can actually milk cows much more often and much more efficiently than humans do. And so what happens is the cows, with these chips in their ears, when they feel uncomfortable, they walk into the barn, they step on this rotating platform, the milkers attach robotically, the cows are milked. Because of the chip in the ear, the computer knows exactly how much milk they're getting. It can test the quality of the milk. It can determine if the cow is getting sick and needs some antibiotics or something. It can tell how much the cow is eating. All of this stuff is done by computers. It's really, really incredible. Some of these modern barns now also clean themselves, which is incredible. The robots that do that kind of thing, this is a huge, huge transformation. Tractors now, the GPS in tractors make it so on these big farms, you see these more in the Midwest, although we're starting to see more of them here in Utah. The tractors will within an inch as you're planting seed, you generally have to overlap, which again costs more. With GPS knowing exactly where the tractor has been, you don't have to do that anymore. There's no overlap. Again, it gets much more efficient. We're using drone technology out of Utah State University. The drones are able to fly over the crops and the fields. They can tell how much water the plants are getting, if they're being overwatered or underwatered. It turns out most of the time we're overwatering, which is not good for the plant, and again not good for our consumption here in the state. One of the ways that ag can use less water is by employing this technology. So that is happening. It can tell that when crops are ready to harvest. The drone technology is really, really amazing out of Utah State. If you get a chance to look that up, there's some fun videos on what they're doing up there. So this connectivity absolutely matters. If we're going to continue to be competitive in national markets with ag, we have to be able to use this technology in powerful ways. So that's one. Second question was with the inland port. The inland port has become weirdly controversial. I'll give you just a little bit of background. The inland port has been part of Salt Lake City's master plan for years. It's something that Salt Lake City has always planned to do. Where it got sideways was when the legislature stepped in to make that happen. There's a lot of negotiation between the legislature and Salt Lake City on what that would look like. There were disagreements, but in the end, there was a work product that everybody agreed to. Everybody got 90% of what they wanted, and we were good to go. It fell apart during the legislative session as lobbyists for Salt Lake City came in and tried to put something else in the bill that wasn't agreed to. That made some legislators mad. The former Speaker of the House got upset, said, "I'll show you," pulled everything out Salt Lake City wanted, pushed the bill through. That made Salt Lake City mad, and everybody got upset, and there was some protests. The governor said, "Hey, let's get together and put this back together," which he did. He called a special session, put it all back in. Everybody was happy, at least mostly happy, and then we went about our way. Unfortunately, we forgot to tell some residents and citizens who were upset, who think that the legislature is always out to get Salt Lake City, and they're not wrong. That happens a lot. There's a lot of disagreement between a very conservative legislature and a very liberal city. And so that happens. Also happened to be in the middle of a mayoral election, and so you had all these candidates. Now it was a very highly politicized environment where they would say, "Gosh, if I want to be elected, I have to be against the inland port," although the inland port's a really good thing, and so there was just this tug of war going on. Let me tell you where we are now. The inland port is moving forward. There is a lawsuit. We think that will be taken care of. The good news is that the parties really are working close together again. The incoming mayor and the council has been wonderful to work with. This is going to be the most environmentally friendly inland port in the nation. This is really important to us. We're looking at, again, technology, hydrogen, some of the advancements that are happening there. I just met with a member of the legislature and some folks from Detroit working on hydrogen technology and hydrogen fuel cells. The ability to potentially have the inland port have a kind of a zero footprint when it comes to carbon emissions. There are some really cool things that are happening out there. And from a more practical standpoint, and an economic standpoint, this is really big for the state. Last year I had an opportunity to go back to Farnborough, just outside of London, the largest air show in the world. By the way, I don't get to do that often. In fact, that's the only time I've ever gone on a trade mission. That's the governor's purview. Usually when he's in France, I'm in Leverkusen. It's just how we do things. But he couldn't go to this one, and I got to go, and I got to meet with 40 aerospace companies, the largest aerospace companies in the world, companies you all know very well, Boeing, Airbus, others. And in every one of those conversations, we talked about the inland port, and it was something they were very interested in as they're looking to expand operations here in the state of Utah in powerful ways. And so this will be a really, really good thing, a really good opportunity for us to get trucks off the road and move goods from Utah to the coast and to the rest of the world. Please.
Do you see any intersects with SITLA? And where does that fit into the plan? The real estate play, the leasing play, and this smart cities, the technology intersects?
Yeah, about SITLA. So SITLA is, for those of you that don't know, SITLA is our state trust lands. And when we became a state, the federal government set aside parcels of land all over the state to be used and held in trust for education. And so any income that is made with the either disposal of those properties or leasing on those properties goes into a fund that is then used for education, which is a wonderful thing. And the good news is the state finally figured this out about 15 years ago, and that fund has been growing in powerful ways. Now over $2 billion, and the residual on that, the interest on that then goes directly to our schools, and it's a really big deal every year, and it's growing. So that's a really positive thing. As someone who was in the private sector and had to deal with SITLA, it was the worst. We talk about how bad the federal government is to deal with when it comes to crossing federal land, and they're terrible. SITLA is equally there. Sometimes values their property much like the railroad values their property, and makes it really hard. So this is something I've been kind of working on around the edges. I hope to be able to work on in more powerful ways in the future. Having SITLA be a partner with what we need to do to get fiber and connectivity where it needs to be. Again, mostly we're talking about rural, right? Because that's where you find these parcels of land, is in rural Utah. And so by jacking up those prices and making it just unfeasible to get across, and not just the prices, but also the permitting piece, right? So we need to speed up the permitting so that these projects can get done in ways that will benefit rural Utah. And I think there's some creative ways that we can work with SITLA to help them understand that this, yes, it is their mission to maximize the returns on that land, but can that also be to benefit school children? And one of the ways to benefit school children is to make sure that they have connectivity in their towns and at their homes and at their schools in these rural places where we desperately need it. And so I think there's room to do better there. At least I hope there is. Thank you. I think I'm supposed to finish up maybe one more question, and then we can be done if anybody has one. And please. Yeah.
How do you see in the future as we grow here so much what happens in, say, southern Utah, like in St. George, and there are more plans to build more of a tech community and bring in more talent to southern Utah?
Yeah, great question. So for those of you in the back, the question is, we're seeing the growth here and the tech talent here. What about Southern Utah? What about St. George in those areas? And it's a very valid question. I've actually been working very closely with Mayor Pike, with their Chamber of Commerce, and they're doing some incredible things. If you're not familiar with Tech Ridge and what's happening down there, many of you maybe flew into or at least saw where the airport used to be, up on that flat ridge up there. The airport, of course, they have a new airport, it's been moved, and that land has been vacant for a long time. The state, as well as the community, has really been investing in that property. We built the new ATC, the Dixie Applied Technology Center down there is incredible. New building, it's amazing. And they've, the development now is called Tech Ridge, and what they're doing is they're bringing technology companies there. And that's going to help create kind of a mini Silicon Slopes type environment where as they're reaching out, they're getting a lot of input. I mean, who doesn't want to live in St. George, right? It's crazy that we don't have the talent there. The talent wants to be there, the opportunities just haven't been there. With Tech Ridge, those opportunities are coming. They're coming very quickly, and they're seeing a huge spike in interest down there. Also, moving Dixie State College to a university. We did that 6 years ago, and there's been some incredible changes going on around that. There is a new innovation center that was just recently completed down there, where their students are getting involved. They're able to work on their own business concepts. They brought in technology, 3D printing and other technologies there, allowing the students real hands-on opportunities, as well as teaching entrepreneurism and what it takes to start your own business. And so they're trying to foster that ecosystem that is so important to economic growth and technology growth. And so right now the future is very, very bright. If you want to get in early, now's the time to get in Southern Utah. And with that, I'll wrap up. Let me just conclude by thanking all of you so much for what you're doing. I hope you realize how lucky we are to live where we live. I say that all the time. It's part of my job as Lieutenant Governor. But as I travel around the country, just a couple months ago, I was in St. Louis with 18 other Lieutenant Governors, and we had a couple panels, and people on the panel, not knowing that I was going to be there, they were talking about Utah and how special this is. And what's really interesting is we're better known. I was just talking to Dave Layton with Layton Construction. He said as he travels around the country and the world, he said, this has never happened before, but when I tell people I'm from Utah, everywhere I go, people know Utah now. And what they were talking about on this panel was our ability to collaborate in ways that other states are not able to. Of course, you see that politically. What's happening in our nation's capital now and over the past several years, I refer to it often as a dumpster fire. It's not fair to dumpster fires. It's so bad back there. It's really awful. We do better here, and it's not just that, but it's really, and this is the sweet spot. It's government working together with the private sector, with the nonprofit sector, and even with the faith-based sector. Those areas of us all working together, understanding what we do better and what we do worse, and letting others shine and not caring who gets the credit. That's the secret sauce. I really believe that, and that's what's going to lead us and allow us to continue to lead the nation in technological advancements, in smart cities, and really, there's no reason we can't be the first smart state as we use these partnerships, as we work together and combine to put those talents, those assets, and those opportunities together in powerful ways. So thanks for what you're doing to make that happen, and keep up the good work. Thank you.